very good evening to you from Sunday Network. Being the 11th of May, this marks the beginning of Ramadan, and later in the program we'll be talking to a prominent member of the Islamic Council of South Africa about what Ramadan means to Muslims. But first, our documentary, and tonight we look at a condition that affects some 80 million people worldwide, including South Africans, the disfiguring skin disorder known as psoriasis. Now, it's a recurring condition which can have severe psychological effects on sufferers, many of whom see themselves as social outcasts. Many treatments are available to keep the condition under control. Now, one of them, at the Dead Sea in Israel, is intriguing because of its unique climatic conditions. So the question is, why does it work? Well, Carol Charliewood and her team were invited to investigate this by the Israeli authorities.
Get thee out of thy country, unto a land that I will show thee, was the call of God to Abraham nearly 4,000 years ago. And from this beginning, as the land of Canaan, has developed the young electric state of Israel. But tradition persists, and the Western Wall, all that is left of the ancient and splendid Temple of Jerusalem, remains a place of hope, and prayer, and supplication. Sacred, too, as the cradle of Christianity, and a shrine to Muslim faith, Israel straddles a proud but barren desert and the waters of a tranquil inland sea. For thousands of years, the hot springs on the shores of the gentle Sea of Galilee have brought people to this part for health cures. Built in the 3rd century in honor of the Roman Emperor Tiberius, these Roman baths have given way to the sophistication of a modern medicinal spa.
People come here without the ability to move a leg or an arm, with spasm in the body. After serious treatment, they are not healed, but they can go on to live their life without the pains. They come sometimes from Finland, from Germany, also from Israel. People who were injured by the German during the Second World War. For example, we had here a patient who was buried in a coal mine and suffered severe injuries and is getting paid by the German government up to date. Soldiers who have been injured during the Israeli wars, many amputated people, people who got injuries in the spines.
But it's the Dead Sea, glistening with salt in bright, unpolluted sunlight, that is attracting particular attention in the medical world, with its claim to excellent results in treating the disfiguring skin disorder known as psoriasis. This affliction, which sufferers say makes them feel like lepers, unclean and shunned by their fellow human beings, has no cure. It can only be treated as it occurs, and the best treatment is the one that offers the longest relief. At the Dead Sea, the lowest centre on the surface of the earth, no water flows out of the sea, accounting for its high salt content and rich endowment in minerals. Because its atmospheric pressure is the highest in the world, the ultraviolet rays of the sun are reduced, believed to be an important factor in the treatment of psoriasis.
I would rather have a duodenal ulcer than have psoriasis. They go to the hairdressers, they won't touch them. They go into the shop, they handle the food, and they'll get people staring at them. It's not catchy at all, but the public doesn't know that. Lots of patients accept the disease. It doesn't irritate them, it doesn't cause any pain, it doesn't itch. It's on the covered parts of the body. They don't even treat it, they accept it, they live with it. But then you have patients where they have it on the exposed parts, where it's really a big cosmetic problem. Take a woman with a thick crust on the scalp, huge thick scabs on the hands, on the feet. I think those patients, to them, it's psychologically, cosmetically, it's debilitating. I think it's very debilitating.
Stress, I believe, is one of the factors that trigger off the psoriasis. This is controversial. Some of the studies that have been done have not proven absolutely that stress is a triggering factor, but it's always been our experience in the department that many patients break out in their psoriasis after periods of stress.
Where does it start? What causes it?
Well, I think I'd have to go to the drawing board to explain to you perhaps more easily, but to put it simply, with all of us shedding the outer layer of our skin, every time you bath, you wash away the outer layer of your skin, and your skin renews itself fully in 28 days. In psoriasis, the defect is that this renewal time of the skin is speeded up to 6 days, and so these scaly flakes appear because of the rapid renewal of skin.
And there's a genetic factor?
It often is found in families, and yet the inheritance is not straightforward. It's not precisely worked out exactly how it's inherited.
And it doesn't come up in certain groups of people? Or?
No, it's not. There aren't any particular groups in which it's found exclusively.
Most of the psoriasis patients say that probably the worst aspect of the disease or the condition is the social side.
Yes, I think it's a condition which is very cosmetically and socially trying. Patients, first of all, the question of infection. Patients are very concerned because people treat them like lepers and they think it's contagious, and it is something which patients find a great problem, this question of people being alarmed about catching the disease. I've had patients tell me they weren't allowed to try on clothing in shops and this sort of things.
People look at you and the first thing that I know crosses each person's mind, hell, she's contagious. That's who's going to get it? What is it? I went through a stage of covering my arms up because that was the place that was showing the most. In this winter months, it carries straight down your arms. I can control it more with sunlight, and I only get a small area during the summer.
It's one of the most depressing things that can happen to you, knowing that you have psoriasis. It does clear up, it can come back again. At the present moment, I'm clear, but I know that in a few months' time it will come back again. And I think one of the biggest problems that you have is coming to grips with your place in society, because you feel contaminated, you feel unclean, and you feel on the defensive with other people. And this is why it's a very good idea to have a group of psoriasis sufferers together, because they can relate to one another and they can relax with one another.
What has been the worst part for you?
I think the personal feeling of having failed in some way, that either something I've done in my life or my diet or something has been wrong, so I got psoriasis.
It's a very painful thing. It's a very ugly thing. It can spread all over your body. Mine tends to remain in my lower limbs, but it's also in my hands, and it can go on across the face. At the moment, it is quite quiet, if I can use that word.
A lot of patients have lost their jobs. A lot of patients aren't able to really communicate their problems with their colleagues, and so you find isolation problems. And we have one patient who actually spends some of his time trying to sweep up the dead skin from below his office desk. You can imagine he's in actually quite a high position, and this is very embarrassing for him.
In the more severe acute forms, the patient can become generally red. The whole body becomes red, and we call this erythrodermic or exfoliative psoriasis. And those patients become ill, they run a high temperature, and they shed the scales off the skin so that one can collect a bag full of scales from the bed each day. That is really the severe end of the spectrum. In fact, one of the problems is that patients are losing body chemicals like folate in the scale if it sheds in this way. And in the very severe patients with psoriasis, and I must emphasize that this is really a very small percentage of patients, the psoriasis gets out of control completely, and the patient can present with a diffuse reddening of the skin, and on the skin one sees lakes of pustules. The patients are very ill with this. They have a high temperature, they're really ill, and this is one of the emergencies in dermatology.
I had psoriasis at the beginning of this year that was so bad that I actually almost died from it. It's not common, it doesn't happen to very many people, but it can. and you never know when it can affect you, when it can strike you.
When you say you almost died, what form of psoriasis did it take?
I had pustular psoriasis, and which isn't common. When I have psoriasis and it's not bad, but it is there, it depresses me terribly because I never know when this is going to break out again. It has dominated my life. I can't, I have to, if I want to go on holiday, I have to think, how do I feel? Will I be able to travel? Do I feel well enough to travel? And usually not where I am. I'm usually all right wherever I be. But it's the car journey or whatever it be that I have to first think, can I do it?
What do you feel when you're depressed?
Terribly strong death wish. That's the worst of it, is that you feel, I sometimes cry and say, I wish I could die. I shouldn't think that, but I do. It could be that you feel you're a pariah in society to yourself, within yourself. As you say, it doesn't manifest, there's no manifestation of it outwardly, but possibly to me, I feel that I am not a normal person, that I'm an outcast, whatever you like to call it.
They feel alienated, as though their body has let them down, that they feel different from other people. And this is manifested in their behavior at different levels.
What is interesting, though, is very often you can't actually see the skin problem.
Carol, I think the problem there is the fact that on most occasions, there's no justification for their withdrawal from society. But it's merely a projection of their own feelings of inadequacy and of difference that they externalize and they project onto society, and they believe that this is the way society perceives them. And this introduces a lot of avoidance behavior.
Avoiding meeting people, talking to people?
That is correct, because I think the body is so obvious. It's something that is visual, it's tangible, and it almost forms part and parcel of any sort of human interaction.
And of course the skin is the first contact that people have, besides eye contact. And psoriasis isn't a very appealing condition to have. And so the contact that the patients have with each other, sexually, in social situations, can actually be very distressing for them.
Psoriasis is not very selective about the parts of the body it seems to afflict. And because in the marital situation, one's body is obviously a lot more exposed in the intimate sense of the word, one finds with the males feelings of psychological impotence, but also this manifests in sexual impotence. So we have impotence problems.
What sort of treatment are you using? The best treatments topically are tar and dithronol, and this patient is going to have a dithronol treatment. It's a rather messy preparation to use at home, and that's why it doesn't matter if our sheets and his clothing here get a bit messed up, but we use this as an inpatient treatment.
But now patients do complain that the treatment is messy and their clothes get messed up. Is there nothing else that...
Yes, there are other things, but they're less successful. Unfortunately, the more messy the treatment, the tars and these things, the more effective they are. Now, does she have to put her clothes over this?
We dress them up in stockinette because the ointment tends to rub off. And they feel much more comfortable with stockinette on the limbs, especially the hands when they have to have their meals.
If you wear long sleeves, you can throw that garment out because your clothes are completely greased and you cannot get that grease off. There's also a tar treatment which marks them very, very badly, which looks like grease, motor car grease.
It flares up again so fast within the next 9 months or a year, then you'll end up with the same problem. And then 2 years ago, they discovered this new capsule, and which they have given me. I'm actually wearing shorts and walking around with a sweater and going to beaches, whereas I never wore a sweater for about 15 years. I was always in a long sleeve shirt, and fortunately The marks were always on my elbows, but the scales is completely gone now.
In medicine generally, the tendency has been to try and combine the effects of as many useful measures as one can. Each brings their own benefit, and in this way one can get a net result far better than using each one individually.
Just take the gown off.
Ultraviolet actually damages the skin. It causes sunburn, and when chemicals are present, it also causes biological changes that may favorably influence the psoriasis. If you want to help somebody in the country and there are no ultraviolet light sources, natural sunlight is perfectly adequate. And if you want to get a good result from natural sunlight, there's nothing better than putting a thin layer of oil on the skin to improve penetration, and then the effects are very successful.
Are you saying then that if a patient sunbathed on a Durban beach, they would get relief from psoriasis?
If they didn't mind showing it to the other people on the beach. This is always the problem. The most important thing about the machine is that you can give controlled doses of light. If you go and lie in the sun, it's very difficult to know what dose you're actually getting, and in this way to control the effects. But the advantage of the machine, of course, is that you're able to give a calculated dose of whichever type of ray you're interested in.
Spending about an hour a day with a patient, one does get to realize how very badly damaged their self-esteem is when they're covered with scales and the problems they actually have to cope with the everyday life. Willem, who we've treated with this machine, was very badly affected with his psoriasis, and it was very interesting to see how day by day, as his skin improved, how much better he felt about himself and how much better he coped with life generally.
I used to be very embarrassed about it. I'm working out and trying not to be, but it's very difficult. It's very difficult even to talk about psoriasis with your colleagues, with friends, with your family even.
Because do they feel that it might be catching?
I think if anybody doesn't know about psoriasis, they've got no knowledge about it, then they definitely are afraid of catching the same condition.
At school, I had the same thing, kids getting dry spots and odd things at school, and then they come running to you and say, oh, you've given them whatever you have got. Not knowing psoriasis, they obviously think it's a contagious disease. I've also found after I got married that, social life can be a little bit embarrassing because you have a bra and you want to swim, you can't really go and swim, the spots all over you. And I've even had a case at a Christmas party we had where a gentleman came to me and asked or said to me that I'm the worst case of leprosy seen in this country, mixing so freely with people.
Very often they don't want to see anyone, don't want to speak to anyone. They, because their self-image is so badly destroyed, they feel so badly about themselves and what they look like. Their relationships are destroyed.
You go down to the coast, you can't even swim with your grandchildren or anything like that. You've got to just sit and watch them. And you feel sort of an outcast in your own mind and body. That you can't more or less mix with other people down at the sea.
We started a group at the hospital with a psychologist, which was a kind of group therapy to help the patients cope with this condition. And afterwards, this group moved away from the hospital and became the South African Psoriasis Association, which is a self-help group for anyone who has psoriasis.
Similarly, people from all over the world meet at Ein Bokek on the Dead Sea in Israel. Their common bond, psoriasis, their common hope, relief.
I first came here 3 years ago and found that the treatment was very, very successful indeed.
It really does help.
Very, very much, yes. I was clear for about 4 or 5 months completely, and then gradually it started to come back. But even after a year, I was much clearer than I was before I came the first time, and then each year it's been a lot better. It's very embarrassing sometimes because I also have psoriasis on my face, so it does in fact show. It's also sometimes very sore, very painful. It gradually spreads all over the body, and sometimes it's so tender it can bleed. And I also have arthritis, which is sometimes associated with psoriasis, and that gets better here as well.
Because at the moment you seem fairly clear. There's none on your face.
There's a little bit on my face. I think even after four days, it's really starting to go.
Where do you have the worst parts?
Well, some on my body, as you can see, and some on places which I don't really feel I can show you. Very embarrassing and sensitive places, and of course this is one of the advantages of being able to come here, because you can sunbathe nude in the solarium.
You feel like committing suicide, and I was going to do it. I'm not a youngster, and I'm a grandmother of 2 small, lovely granddaughters, and I was on the verge of committing suicide. I couldn't stand myself. I said to my husband, it's a case for divorce. And now I'm getting much better, and I have very good results, and I'm just saying again and again, the government, my government, United States, should take upon them to do this, to send out people and help them every way they can.
It's hard work to lie in the sun and to go into the water and lying in the sun again, and 4 weeks, it's a long time, so it's really hard work.
I think this patient shows everything that we can see in psoriasis. If we start at the top, she has quite bad involvement of the scalp. She has about 50% of the body surface involved. And she also has nail changes, which we could see on her hands. And she also has very bad arthritis of the small joints of her fingers and even of the wrists. But it can affect any joint, even the bigger joints. Even the spine could be affected.
And can this be quite a crippling thing?
It can be. It can be very mutilating, the hands especially.
How do you feel now, having seen the treatment here?
I think it's a very pleasant alternate treatment. No one treatment is effective in every patient. I mean, this varies from patient to patient. The one will respond to ultraviolet therapy, the other one will respond to ointments. So there isn't one particular treatment which is good for every patient.
But does this work?
But this works. This is a very good alternate treatment. It's a very pleasant alternate treatment, and the thing that makes it work is the ultraviolet. They're exposed to sun for 3 weeks. It's, as the patient said, quite hard work to come and lie in the sun here for 3 weeks, and it's the ultraviolet. And because they have more ultraviolet A than ultraviolet B here at the Dead Sea, that's the big advantage.
But now, what about our sun at home? I mean, what is the basic difference?
The basic difference is that at home we have more ultraviolet B, which is the damaging sun ray. Here they tell us, but it hasn't been done, measured scientifically in enough areas and different seasons during different times of the year. They will still do it.
Nowhere else in the world does this spectrum of ultraviolet light occur naturally. So you might say we have a monopoly or a corner on the market in the natural ultraviolet spectrum of light that we have here. Now, this patient has been here for 3 weeks now, and he has almost complete resolution or clearing of his psoriasis. And so within this period of 3 weeks, I think he has done exceptionally well.
So the results here have been more immediate?
Oh, certainly. If you would have seen me 2 weeks ago after my first week, I personally wouldn't have believed that it's going to be this way like it is today in 2 weeks.
I think it is important for us to emphasize that this is a natural treatment, and you had mentioned that when you went to some of the other clinics before for climatotherapy, they had used cortisone creams. And I think it's important for us to stress this point that here at the Dead Sea, we do not use any cortisone preparations. Our treatment is almost entirely natural, mainly the sunlight and the sea.
It's 400 meters below ocean level. And, well, here the radiation is very unique. You can stay longer period in the sun without getting sunburned. Here you have the body of the water, which is the Dead Sea, with a very rare combination of minerals and you can float on the surface. And the combination of the sun rays, the very unique rain from the sun, and the floating and bathing in the mineral-rich water with the black mud that you put on your skin, this combination is very good for people suffering from skin problems.
No, I don't think the minerals play any role. I think we must forget about the minerals because at a salt concentration of 25 to 30%, it won't be, physiologically, it won't be absorbed through the skin. So I don't think the minerals play any role. The mud pack, I think there is something, it's a heat treatment for the joints, for the arthritis.
Not for the skin thing at all?
Not for the skin, but it's only a heat treatment, it's heat. And the thing, what we're told about the mud is that it releases its heat very slowly. So you can put 50 to 55 degrees centigrade of heat on the skin without burning the skin because it releases about 1 degree of its heat in 10 minutes.
A number of the people that we've spoken to here say that their governments or their medical aids are paying for this treatment.
The Danish government pay for the two of us. And the price is 14,000 Danish kroner.
So they pay for the whole trip. Is that the government or the medical aid, or how does it work?
The medical aid pay for my daughter, and the government pay for me.
Do you feel that is justified?
It's a difficult question, that. I think it may be justified in certain patients, especially where to the patients it's a very big psychological problem. They've gone through all the usual routine treatments in hospital, everything which is available. I think it may be justified in those patients because they come here, all the other patients have the same disease. They're in a beautiful atmosphere. They're in a country with more history behind it than anywhere else in the world. It's not only the treatment, they're relaxed, they're away from all their tensions.
But do you think the medical aid societies would pay for that, or perhaps it could be made tax deductible?
I think if the doctor, especially the dermatologist, if he puts in a strong case for it, I don't think the medical aids will mind. They will pay for the treatment. I'm sure there is a point for that. They won't pay for the patient's airfare or the hospital, the stay in the hotel. I don't think they'll pay for that.
Are you not happy with the treatment you're getting at home?
Well, the treatment at home has not worked. Really, it hasn't removed the lesions that are part of psoriasis, and I've been doing the same thing for several years. And I had read about the treatment here.
Of course, they don't promise a cure here. They also say it's just relief.
It is remission, and the hope is that the remission will last for a year or beyond.
So will you come back again, do you think?
I am coming back next year.
How have you found it so far?
Wonderful, just wonderful. In a few short days that I've been here, it has been almost miraculous what has happened to my lesions.
Yes, we know that ultraviolet light has a very beneficial effect in not only psoriasis, but in other skin diseases. We've known that since the ancient times, in fact. This is something which we have used in hospitals in the form of solaria.
Of course, no studies have been done on the long-term effects of ultraviolet here at the Dead Sea, the effects it will have on the skin, which you have with any other ultraviolet light. Skin cancers develop in future. We've heard of patients who've come here 30 times already, and every time they're exposed to the sun for hours, for 3 weeks at a time. So studies will have to be done to see what the side effects are there.
Perhaps the most relevant thing here is that they should measure the light and the quality of the light by using photometers. This is something which they haven't done yet, but which they intend to do. I think when they do that, then they can make some claims as regards the particular specific light which they have there, and whether that is to be found only at the Dead Sea and not elsewhere.
I just wonder if there's anything about the Dead Sea water that might help the psoriasis condition. For instance, maybe it eliminates organisms that are on the body surface that might be participating in bringing out psoriasis.
Could this be all the salt in the water?
I think it possibly could, in that the salt content of the water is so high that an organism would be killed by it, and it may in fact sterilize your body. Now, I asked the doctors about this possibility, and they haven't been able to do the studies yet that it would take to prove this.
It's really a question of budget. We just don't have at this time sufficient budget to make the necessary research. I know we need researchers into the properties of the Dead Sea, yes, but this has to be done on very complicated equipment, which we just don't have the money for at this particular stage, and especially during the time when everybody's tightening their belts here, and the ministries are all cutting down on their budgets in order to stabilize the economy.
We need to know basic questions. What is the nature of the light? Is it really unique? Why does the treatment work? Those questions still aren't answered from my exposure here. But frankly, we do a lot of things in medicine that we know work without truly understanding the mechanisms. I mean, we treat headaches with aspirin, and honestly, we don't know why aspirin works. Suffice it that it works.
And I think that the Dead Sea Psoriasis Center could be an important research facility for understanding what causes psoriasis and what factors might participate in improving it.
Most people practicing relatively modern dermatology can control the vast majority of psoriasis patients. 80%, 90% of patients we can easily treat with a variety of different treatment modalities. It's for that smaller segment, that 5 or 10% of psoriasis patients that we all find difficult in our practices, that end up at the large treatment centers, that tend to have the most number of the most costly medical treatments, which potentially could benefit from this resource.
Just by chance, I read an obscure magazine about the Dead Sea cure, or treatment rather, and I wrote for more information, and I found there were hotels and such a place as an International Psoriasis Center. There's supposed to be a doctor there, but I had enough of doctors too, and I just went to lie in the sun and bathe in the Dead Sea. And after a week, I was quite delighted to find that my psoriasis was beginning to disappear. And after the second week, it was practically gone. And after the third week, my vanity had been restored.
I think it's important to emphasize that there is no permanent cure for psoriasis. In psoriasis, we are looking to control the disease process, much like diabetes or other diseases where there is no cure, and you're mainly trying to put the lid, as we might say, or to control the process.
After having psoriasis for over 30 years, I think you get used to the fact that it's not curable, and you learn to live with it. But at the same time, you still always seek some release, some help, and perhaps one day somebody's going to come up with the magic penicillin for psoriasis, if you will.
It's a very difficult thing to have to live with.
So what are you trying to do?
We try to show all the practical ways that people can help themselves just in little everyday things that are very seldom talked about. I'll give you a very small instance, an example, which to somebody else they would really dismiss it. But for instance, we try and say to people, don't wear clothes that are anything other than a silky material or very light colours, because particularly if they've got scalp problems, this is a very big problem, it continually shows and they feel embarrassed about it. If you have something that's a silky material, you can very quickly brush it away. if you have to wear dark clothes, you can wrap a lovely silk scarf or something round and easily shake it away. These are little things, and they may be meaningless to other people because they don't understand the everyday problems.
It's very, very nice to know that we have an elite group of psoriasis sufferers, and we can all get together and we can relax totally with one another. We can give people support. We can help them when they get depressed and down out. We're a phone call away. Just phone up and say, I need help. We can't cure you, but at least we can talk to you and we can give you some assistance.
And understand.
Yes. And I think it has to be somebody who has psoriasis, because I find it very difficult with people who say, oh, aren't you lucky it isn't on your face? No, I'm not lucky it isn't on my face. I'm just unlucky I've got it at all.